Join me in this video as I try out some new carving tools. Enjoy. Welcome back everyone. So yeah, picked up this little set of wood carving tools from Amazon. I think it cost about £10. It's only a little cheap one. I've been looking to do some carving on some trees for a little while. Also looking to use these kind of wood carving knives to help close some wounds. In a few videos I've seen recently, they talk about scraping away just that outer layer of the wound. Essentially by rescarring the edge of the wound, it can force the healing process. Doing that here, and then I did want to do some bigger Shari on this tree. So this is my mint julep. As well as that, we got some Deadwood parts that I've already done, but I wasn't happy with just how they looked. It was way too straight. Really, obviously, the best way is to wire out this branch before I killed it off, give it a bit of shape, let it set in that shape, and then come back to do the Deadwood. This is one of my first trees, so made some mistakes this one along the way, but trying to make it a little bit better every time that I get to it. So you would have seen this is recently the one that I was talking about, soil drainage and percolation and how we can just remove the top layer. So this is that tree. So just twist up that Deadwood on the right there. I like to use a pair of pliers, and I put a little bit of cloth in it just to try and hide any kind of tool marks. And then I'll just basically giving it a twist. Now this is already dried out, and I've applied lime salt for a couple of times, so pretty dry wood, but then giving it the twist just kind of gives it a bit more of a naturalistic look. Then I've decided with this, there was a low hanging bottom left branch which I left to extend for a little while just to try and give the base a bit more thickness. So the base of this tree was actually thinner than that portion above there. Just on where you see that branch coming out to the left, the portion above was actually thicker. So I left it on for a year or so, and it did thicken up. Not the greatest taper, but again, one of my first trees, so we live and learn. So I'm just going to try and connect this Shari to that bottom left branch that's Deadwood already. And I'm looking to improve that as well today. As well as sorting out some other wounds that I've got from, as you can see, there's some little lumps that I've left about where I've cut branches off and left a stub for dieback, and just need to go in and clean them up. There's a few bigger wounds up the top where I cut off bigger branches. I'm just going to rescore the edges of, and hopefully get that healing process going quicker. No, this is actually my first time using these tools, so apologies for how badly I'm using them, I suppose. I can be quite heavy-handed at times, so doing the finer work is something new to me, and that's something as you practice you get better at. So I realise there might be some viewers that don't actually know the terminology in bonsai. I'm sure a lot will. But for anyone who doesn't know, so Shari is basically Deadwood on a trunk. That's how I'd explain it anyway. I'm sure there's a proper definition out there. It's where we remove a portion of bark all the way down to kind of heartwood, really. So you remove all the layers of cambrium, xylem. I can't remember all the layers myself, not off the top of my head. We remove all these layers to stop the growth in that kind of section. It's something that's done a lot in junipers, pines, some yew trees. Most yew trees have deadwood. Some other species as well. You don't really find deadwood on deciduous bonsai, although I don't really see why not. There's plenty of deciduous trees out there with actual deadwood in nature. I think the hardest part is obviously keeping it from rotting and, you know, making sure that it stays the life of the tree kind of thing. But with these kind of trees, junipers and that, it lasts a lot longer and generally looks more aesthetic as well. So essentially I'm just cutting off all kind of life to that kind of portion of the tree, which I know sounds terrible. but I'm hoping to make the live vein on the right hand side of this tree, and eventually over the years the live vein will kind of bulge away from the deadwood part, making it more interesting as we go along. So I'm trying to cut down all the way here, bit of a tricky one because this is potted deep in this pot and I'm trying to get my hand in there, so apologies again for the focusing in and out. And yeah, kind of glad I shot this one in 4K though, just so you can still see definition even when I'm zoomed in. It's a very windy day today, so I've cut out all the audio in the background because it would just be annoying. I was fighting with this branch on the left, which is part of like the cascade part of the tree, and it kept on getting in the way of the camera. Yeah, I had to cut out a lot of footage for that. So that's how we're looking. I would say one mistake that I made with this is that I've started it too close to the front and there isn't any gap on the left hand side, so now I've created kind of, it makes the trunk look skinnier, if you see what I'm saying there. So the brown pot portion of the trunk looks skinnier than the rest of the tree, so I've kind of created my own inverse taper. Now funny enough, I was watching a video on this where they use deadwood to accentuate the kind of thickness of the trunk, or to hide fault. I've created my own fault with this one, but yeah, not every tree's perfect and not every tree's going to have the perfect taper, and if anything I think it adds a bit of movement to the trunk as well. I think that's what I was really going for, is because that bottom section of the trunk was quite, it wasn't straight, but it was just a bulge basically, that's all it was. There's only a tiny bit of movement there, so by putting that shape of the deadwood in, it does kind of create the illusion of this better movement within the bottom of the trunk. So here I'm just peeling away that deadwood branch on the left, and this is one of the best methods to use to create some of your deadwood, is just pulling away at the kind of wood, giving it a twist and a turn. And unfortunately I was fighting with that part of the branch because it was so dry where I've done it, I think it's about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago. It was such a brittle part of the tree that it's hard to kind of get that going. But and I really should get some thinner pliers for this kind of work, long nose ones maybe. But essentially what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to pull the wood away from that branch and down the part of the shari that I've just created. It turned out to be quite harder than I expected, so you will see me eventually go back in with more tools and kind of create my own kind of crevice in there. My initial plan was to hollow out that little part of the trunk there, so over time it kind of creates that kind of cave looking effect in the root base. And so here I finally managed to rip off quite a big chunk. I'm just going to twist that and use the force against itself to make it easy to pull down rather than trying to pull against the tree constantly. And that's what you see there. And I'll just shorten that deadwood part up. Essentially, I mean, I look at that kind of deadwood like a snapped off branch, right? So it's one that's died off and it's snapped, and to kind of make that die-off process a bit more realistic, that's why I've also gone for the shari underneath it, so it looks like that whole portion of the tree's actually died off for whatever reason, rather than just the branch itself. Sometimes just a branch of deadwood can look a bit odd. Obviously branches do die off, but there's usually a reason for that, and I'm just trying to make that part of the composition there. So I'm just going to rework some of this deadwood on the right as well. I'm not too happy with how long it is now compared to the left hand one, and trying to add some more twists. So usually with junipers, really old junipers anyway, that they get these gnarly twists and turns in their own branches, and especially the deadwood is all twisted up, and you know, the force of gravity, these branches would have snapped downwards, and nothing really snaps upwards unless it's obviously forced. So I'm just trying to create that illusion that it's the weight's come down it and that's why it snapped. And so here I'm just cleaning up some cuts that I made a couple of years ago when I didn't really have a clue what I was doing. I'm pretty sure I used garden shears to get rid of most of these branches beforehand, so this time obviously I'm coming back in with a concave cutter. And even this concave cutter, which is a bonsai tool, and usually bonsai tools are quite expensive, I think that only cost me £9. Obviously when I'm talking about the price of stuff, this is bonsai on a budget, that's what my page is all about, but I'm not saying that the expensive tools aren't worth it. You do pay for quality. So it isn't about that kind of part. You will get better quality, well, most of the time with the better tools you use. But at the same time, I'm trying to make sure that people know that you can still do this kind of work and this art form without breaking the bank. I'm just trying to flatten out this. Nub. The concave cutter wasn't quite getting in there enough. It's a bit too big. I need to get a smaller one at some point just to do some finer work. Now I've got some more Shohin and Marmay kind of trees. I'm just trying to dig out that central part just to make sure that when the callus does heal over, it actually heals over the whole thing. There isn't just a lump of deadwood hanging out of it. So this year I think I'm just going to let this one grow out. I cut it back a bit too hard last year. Obviously you can see the younger foliage coming through there, the needle foliage. So the needle foliage is like, it's what it reverts to when it's in kind of a shock state where you've taken off way too much foliage, especially on the juniper lights. And mint juleps are quite hard to keep as a bonsai or grow as a bonsai because the foliage just elongates. It isn't really compact compared to like a Bloors or an Italigawa. It's not really that kind of foliage, so really the tree needs to be bigger, essentially. The bigger the foliage mass, like, when you talk like a beech tree, the leaves are quite big. No matter how much you try and reduce them, they're still going to be quite big leaves compared to like a Chinese elm or a cotoneaster, or a cotoneaster. So essentially that means that the scale-wise, the trunk needs to be bigger, so this is still quite a small tree. I don't know if it'll ever look great. It's one of them trees that I've just been using as a project kind of thing. It's one that I'll practice on, see what happens, and then apply that kind of logic to other trees. So yeah, as I say, I'm just going to let this one grow out. It needs more branching off the trunk. I cut off way too many branches, which is a mistake I made a lot when I first started in bonsai. I thought one left branch, one right branch, one back branch, that's kind of how it's said. And this is where you've got to take every bit of advice with a pinch of salt, because although that's generally the idea, it depends on the scale of the tree, right? And when you're making smaller trees like Shohin trees, which is what majority of people will have, just because that's where the material is kind of the right price. You can get some bigger trees, but you're talking thousands, and I know some people can afford that, and that's great as well. But any kind of new starter, I wouldn't. The way I always looked at bonsai is like a first car. I wouldn't go out and spend 50k on a first car. I don't really know how to look after them. I don't know what I'm doing with it. I'm sure over time I will get more expensive material as I get better with the art and making sure I can actually keep them alive. But I wouldn't want to spend. Even now, I'm 3 years in. I wouldn't want to spend £200-300 on a tree that I don't think I can keep alive or go in the way that it should. Yeah, so I'm just going to feed this one generously this year, let it all grow out, and I won't cut it back at all until maybe autumn later on this year or spring in the new year. Just applying some cut paste. So that's just I forgot what this brand's called actually. It's like a liquid version. I'm yet to get the putty, which I do want. But I've had this tube since I started, so it's just like 3 years worth of cut paste that I've managed to keep. And I generally only use cut paste on bigger cuts. The little tiny cuts I don't really bother with, especially on a species like this. Maybe in a maple I'll use it more. Things that can bleed quite readily. So yeah, I'm just going around trying to clean up this trunk a little bit, take away some of these nubs and get the healing process started on that. If you enjoyed today's content, please make sure to subscribe, like, and hit that bell notification. I'll see you soon.